Alright, you guys, welcome to Guardian of the Woods. I'm Zach. Tonight's encounter story came from a friend of mine. It was actually his cousin. I've been asking about it for a long time, and he was kind enough to finally send it to me. So let's kick it off. Tonight's encounter story is called Bigfoot Gave Him the Shock of His Life While Jogging in the Sierra Nevadas. Running has always been a huge passion of mine ever since my middle school years. I ran track in high school and never really had the time for it in college due to my studies. But even then, my love for running has never weaned. My family has made it a tradition to go on to family trips together every year at a destination we all agree on. We've been doing these trips ever since I can remember. This particular trip, we had all agreed to go to the beautiful Sierra Nevada mountains for a week. I was hesitant at first only because that was the exact time I had decided to run my very first marathon in Santa Rosa, California. I didn't want to miss a day of training because if I ran this marathon within a certain amount of time, it would qualify me for the Boston Marathon, which has always been a huge dream of mine. Being mimicked by Bigfoot. Lucky for me, I have a family that supported me 100% of the time. My dad had told me he would drive me to the main road and he would meet me there a half hour before I was scheduled to be back. That works for me, I said. First 2 days went as scheduled. High spirits, beautiful weather, no problems whatsoever. I liked the fact of the altitude challenge to my lungs, thinking it would do wonders to my training regimen. There was nothing more beautiful than running in nature, surrounded by pure beauty. Definitely God's country. The third mid-morning run started smooth as usual. I would run 5 miles out, then turn around and run 5 miles back to meet my dad at our designated meeting spot. It wasn't until my first mile back in that I heard moving around to the right of me, about 8 feet off the main road, a bit into the brush. In fact, it was almost like who or whatever was in the near woods next to me was mimicking me running. Each and every step was in perfect unison with mine. You don't think about it, who was mimicking me was anything other than a human. But you can't really make it out due to the thick brush. After about a quarter of a mile, it got pretty old. I slowed my pace and blurted out, "Okay, I hear you in there. Knock this shit off." That very moment absolutely rocked my world and my beliefs from that day on. As I yelled out to whoever was following me during my run, I had decided to step out from behind the massive tree they were standing behind. Holy crap. What the hell is standing there looking at me? It wasn't at all what I had expected to step out from behind a tree at any point in my life whatsoever. I thought to myself in shock, okay, that's a Bigfoot. Literally no other thought entered my mind. If I was to guess, the Bigfoot was at least 6.5 to almost 7 foot tall, covered in reddish brown hair, and stunk of holy hell. It had then occurred to me that the very smell had hit me during the previous day run. Me just thinking it was a dead animal carcass in the woods somewhere. Boston Marathon, here I come. At that very second, I wasn't training for a marathon anymore. I was running for my life. I was running way faster than a 7-minute mile. Well, at least in my mind I was. I didn't slow down until coming into the last mile and a half after my adrenaline had run out. I might have calmed down a little bit, but I was still freaked out more than ever. My dad was there as usual saying, "Dang, Bill, I wasn't expecting you for another 20 minutes or so." All I could say was, "Dad, let's go." There was a Bigfoot 4 miles back following me. "I'm tired. I'm scared. Please, let's just go." He had asked me if I was serious. Yes, I'm serious, I answered. Let's go. He didn't say much after that, but he took me back to our campsite without another word. He had looked at me and asked me not to say anything to my brother and sister about this. Okay, I don't want to freak them out. Given they were much younger than I told him I wouldn't. I don't even want to talk about it myself. Going back to the scene, my parents and my uncle did their best to calm me down, which I did eventually. After calming down a bit, my uncle wanted to know more about it. I flat out told him, I saw Bigfoot. I know, I know, Bill. But what exactly did you see? Describe it to me, he asked. He was a 7 foot tall, half man, half ape, half God only knows, I answered, covered in hair. Something like that. Then I ran. What did his face look like, he asked. Did you see it at all? Yeah, he was like 8 feet from me. He looked curious. He had dark brown eyes, heavy brow line, and not really any lips. His nose seemed wide. His skin was darker in the face. Would you take me there? He asked. That was exactly what I did not want to hear at the moment. Can we just wait until later, like tomorrow or something? I asked. I really don't feel like going back at all, really. He understood. For the rest of the night, I just sat with the thoughts of what had happened to me earlier that day. The next morning came, a couple hours of sleep. My dad asked how I was doing. I'm okay, just a little tired since I didn't get much sleep last night. Your uncle had asked me if you would take him to where you'd seen it. I really don't want to. I'm sure you understand. He replied, It'll be fine, Billy. I'll go with the two of you. You don't even need to get out of the car. Going down the winding road back to the scene of the Bigfoot encounter was a little bit unnerving. When we got to the place where I had seen it, my uncle, my dad, got out of the truck cautiously and curiously while they scanned for anything unusual. Whatever was there yesterday is gone now. Finally finding out that my uncle was a huge Bigfoot junkie made complete sense why he wanted to go back so bad. They scanned the woods of any kind of evidence for a good hour but came up with nothing. After a while, they finally got back into the truck. My uncle told me he would have loved to have had the experience I had with Bigfoot. I would have been more than happy to give it to him too. While heading back to the campground, he had told me a story of a couple of friends 10 years ago paid a guide to have their own personal Bigfoot encounter. They hiked and camped in the woods for at least 3 days and came away with nothing, not even a track. Me, he said, just doing a casual run, minding my own business, training for a marathon, not looking for anything whatsoever, winds up having a world-class encounter, one of the best I've ever heard of. Back to the mountain. The next day we had gathered our stuff and peeled out of there. The week was short. The following days had gone by like normal. I ran my marathon eventually, hung out with friends, and went to work. Never could get that beast out of my mind. A couple years had gone by, and the only person I've ever told was my girlfriend. Well, besides my family, that is. She asked if I would ever go back up there. I said probably, but just passing through. She was kind of into that kind of stuff, so I decided to take her. Driving up to the spot was a little bit nerve-wracking, but she had helped me keep my mind occupied on other things. Arriving at the spot I told you about in the story, I told her the story and exactly how it went down. Her being her, she was fascinated with my encounter. I even had the guts to take her to the tree it stepped out from behind of. At that moment I realized it was a lot taller than I first realized. Feeling okay with being there, We took a small walk around, then got back into the car and headed back home. From what I've heard and read about, my Bigfoot experience was a unique one. Why it was following me or mimicking me is something I will never know. Why he chose me to show itself to, again, I don't know. But that was my Bigfoot encounter. I think one is enough for me. If you're out and about in the forest, there's no saying what you'll encounter. I just know from now on I will always be aware of my surroundings and never be alone again out there, ever, ever again. And I don't recommend you do either. Thanks for letting me tell the story, Zach. Billy.